So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our industry-wide Warm Wisdom book launch webinar. I am Ellora Coupe. I am founder of Her Own Space for women homeowners undertaking retrofit work and Her Retrofit Space, supporting the emerging and existing professional women. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our webinars are really relaxed, so please grab your lunch, a cup of tea, make yourself comfortable. Please add your questions and thoughts to the chat throughout the session, and we will get to those during our Q&A time. We have allocated 20 minutes to discuss the new book, Warm Wisdom with Louise Howlett. And we have also been very fortunate to allocate 10 minutes to Sian Richards, a member of Her Own Space, and ask her about her own personal experience of installing a heat pump. Today is not a technical CPD on heat pumps. It is a conversation about how we as an industry support homeowners, and also how homeowners can be better guided to finding and fitting a heat pump stress-free. Louise brings more than 17 years working with heat pumps with R.A. Brown and over 25 years in the industry, as well as her own experience of living with one. This session is, as I said, being recorded, and everyone who's registered in here today will receive the replay and a digital copy of Warm Wisdom after the webinar. So I'd like to hand over to Louise to start today with the first question. Louise, tell us, why did you write Warm Wisdom and what gap were you trying to fill for homeowners?
So a couple of reasons. I think probably one of the main triggers was kind of a sort of a mixture of a feeling of embarrassment and frustration. So I was aware that there were Facebook Facebook forums out there, mainly run by engineers, very good heating engineers. But the problem with them was that a homeowner or a non-technical person would go into those forums with a question about, is my house suitable for a heat pump? I've had this estimate, I've had this quote. And then all the engineers would jump into this forum, and then I just felt for the homeowner that they were going to come out from that huge thread really confused and actually potentially put off even going on that journey for a heat pump, because it was all so much technical stuff. There were so many variables, there was so much. And I've just realised that if I was as a homeowner, and I am a homeowner and I'm not technical, I thought, how is that person ever going to make a decision? So that was one reason. And the other trigger was really networking. So when I do general business networking here in Norfolk, what I find is being a heat pump installer, it creates conversation, but it's like it's quite polarized. It's either, oh, you must have loads of work on heat pumps becoming the big thing, or it's the opposite. It's, oh, heat pumps don't work. How can you keep your house warm with a heat pump? And what I realised was that there's no elevator pitch. There was no elevator pitch that I could really answer or explain. One, how difficult it is to be an independent heat pump installer, or two, yes, your house is definitely warm with a heat pump. So those were the factors really that triggered the book.
And you say homeowners don't need to become heating experts, and it's really, really technical out there. What do you think they actually need to understand before deciding whether a heat pump is right for their home?
Well, I feel that, and I heard, and a potential customer said this to me the other day. He actually said, oh, I know where the cold spots are in my house. I know. It's like I feel people need to look at their house and imagine what their house could be like with the different factors that I explain in the book. Think of their house if they're transferred to lower water temperature heating, and if instead of perhaps having a scheduled heating where it's on in a couple of hours in the morning, couple of hours in the evening, and it's really has to work hard to get up to temperature, if thinking of running at their house at a low and slow sort of, and then bearing in mind areas where maybe their radiators are currently undersized and they've got sort of cold spots, and why those cold spots are. So it's kind of being a house detective and actually feeling the change in your house almost before you then go on the journey, because you can then almost get a feel for what the heating engineers that you ask into your house to potentially survey your house, you can get a feel for yourself of what they're, and sort of understand their language without necessarily getting into the technical language. That's the sort of journey that I feel people can become more aware of the way that fossil fuel heating works, which is very hot, very high speed, and the way heat pump heating works, which is just basically lower but even, much more of an even continual heat.
You make a really good point in the book that that I thought was really interesting, is that people have never are buying something they've never experienced before. And we'll get onto it maybe as a prompt in the discussion later on. But also, my next question to you is, the book really goes through finding the right installer. It's a really good theme in the book. What should homeowners look for, and what are the warning signs they should be aware of?
So I've had a beef, and I don't know if there's anybody from MCS on here or connected with MCS, but I literally shared this with senior people at MCS last week. I feel, because our microgeneration certification scheme that we have to work within as an accreditation body, how I wish things worked was that a homeowner could go to a really clear directory of the installers in their area that they could find really easily. But unfortunately, for some reason, MCS can't have failed, even with an update of their database, to provide a really nice clear list. Just put in air source heat pumps in my area, and you could put your nearest town, or you could put your postcode, or you could put your county, or whatever it is, and then just get a clear list of installers, and then you look and see what technologies they'd installed, possibly more details, whether they offered the boiler upgrade scheme. So just real clear search function. But that isn't there at the moment. The MCS search function is really awful, and I have had people complain to me about it over the phone. So therefore, my structure of how to find an installer, the starting point was more out there in the general world, which feels a bit more vulnerable. So it's like doing a Google search and then looking at the brochure, assuming that company has got almost a brochure website, kind of picking up clues from the brochure website about the mix of their work, and how many installs they've done, and things like, which seem again out there in the world rather than attached to the accreditation body as it possibly should be, is Google reviews and things like that, and looking at them and seeing if they seem genuine, not fabricated. And just, I mean, if a company has got a lot of case studies of a lot of different types of heat pump installs, for us, we've gone down the route of putting our work forward every year for national awards, and we've been really successful in that. But that takes resource and effort, and a smaller company might just not have. They might do some really good work, but not have the back office to even put themselves forward in that way. So it's stuff like that where you can see they've done installs in a variety of different domestic properties, like independent, like private houses, rather than just say social housing. Or if you've got a company that says they do heat pumps, and yet their whole website is just huge, massive solar arrays or whatever, then you've got to see if you can find what the actual heat pump experience is beneath, what might be really good renewables experience in terms of solar PV perhaps, but then they might not actually do a lot of heat pumps. It's trying to get that feel for the genuine heat pump work that they do.
And it's difficult because it's not easy to walk out my front door now and ask a neighbour who installed their heat pump yet. Definitely not in that. We're not at that time yet, but I'm hoping soon, when I install my heat pump, all my neighbours will come round and say, so who did install your heat pump? And obviously you mentioned as well Nesta, which is fantastic.
Visitor heat pump, yes.
Yeah, which is really helpful.
It's very difficult for us as independent installers. Like, I keep thinking of ways we could kind of incentivize our customers to go on there, but really So it's a strange customer journey, because a lot of customers, and a lot of our customers are doing significant renovations or self builds, and they've just used this technology, and they've almost done it without having to think about it. They've, their architects have worked with them on their amazing projects, and then when they finish, they don't think of themselves as having a show house or something to show off. They're just living in their house. So it's very difficult as an installer to then kind of nudge or put pressure on anybody to say, sign your house up to visit a heat pump, because for them, they've transitioned, they're living with the modern technology, they don't necessarily feel they need to share it. So
Mm.
it's kind of that we've got so many installs, but we don't at the moment really have any leverage. It would be more just having a conversation by chance, and then them showing an interest and saying, oh well, you could put your install on visit a heat pump.
Mm.
So it's definitely a good scheme, but there'll still be masses of heat pumps that are not on that scheme,
Yeah.
not for any reason apart from that it's become normal to that person, and they're
Yeah.
therefore not even thinking about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Um, I want to move on to trust and communication. Um, and you talk about this as well in your book. Where do you see trust and communication breaking down most often between homeowner and installer?
I think one of the challenges is if you're a homeowner, you're doing an extensive retrofit. Something I bear in mind, because in another life I'm trained as a well-being professional, is the stress that people are under. And I think they can be under such extreme stress that they can mistrust almost all of their contractors at one point or another, or they can just get in their head that somebody's due at such and such a time, and somebody should be, and you can get into that mindset. I can see it. I've seen it in the way that customers communicate with us. There'll be a builder there, and then the customer will be ringing up and saying, oh, but I need you to come and do XYZ. And then we'll ring the builder up, and the builder will say, no, we're not at that right point. You were right. You got the right idea of when you needed to come in. And the homeowner can be in such an intense stress situation. So I think there's that to bear in mind. And almost, if you're the homeowner reflecting, you need to set the relationship up, and it does need to be trust, but you also need um, to communicate, but not dictate in a funny sort of way. You need to trust that if you give the contractor some information, and then they'll give you information back and say, well, if this is happening, then this is where things then fit in. Because I think sometimes a homeowner can, like, in their very stressed state, they can try and do everything in a way that they just haven't got that professional background. So it's forming that at the early stages when you're just planning it, before you get into that stress state. It's building up that level of trust and talking and communicating, and almost getting that communication, contractual communication, is if you come to me with this information, then we'll feed back to you, and we'll talk to the builder, and we'll talk to the, and we'll fit. What we do is we pick up the signals from all these professionals, and then we try and slot it in, even without the end customer specifically necessarily telling us. Sometimes it's easier to work with the main building contractor and then make sure that we slot in, because,
Yeah.
as I say, it can be really difficult for the homeowner themselves to always be sure. And that's what I think a good heating contractor should do, is slot in. And
And
there's a bit
and
of trust needed there.
and we talked about it briefly last week, you and I, about uncertainty and kind of alleviating as much of that uncertainty as possible, because it's uncertainty that stalls people. And the anxiety then builds, as you said, and the stress then builds. Um, and lastly, before we go on to Sean, I love this book. I'm reading it again. You can see my post-its. What do you hope Warm Wisdom changes for both the homeowners reading it and for the professionals?
So I wrote it for, as like a huge giant business card. Obviously unashamedly, I wrote it to use all those networking meetings I talked about earlier, so that when people are saying all that stuff, I can give them something that explains it. but I also really wrote it with all my fellow professionals, either locally, other types of professionals, like I think there are some local architects on this call, is to share it with other professionals, either locally, who might be working with end customers, or nationally, all the other installers who, the peer group, who are wanting to communicate with their customer. It isn't a book to sell to make money, which is why this meeting is partly about digitally launching it. It's that thing of showing what I feel with my 70. It's very few people with 17, 18 years experience in heat pumps that have been on the whole journey with MCS, on the whole journey with the market and how the market's changing, and the technology. So it's sharing all that, and providing resource, and also then something I can then build on, because I want, even since I wrote the book, the more things are changing, people have asked me questions that I think, well, I must write an article about that, or it's a living thing that going to move on as we go through the next very crucial years for this industry, which it is crucial. The decarbonisation from heat pumps is in my view crucial, because my bottom line is decarbonisation. That's where my motivation lies.
I mean, just on the bookshelf behind me, I've got probably a handful of the books that a homeowner at the moment can buy on how to install a heat pump, or how to go, but actually they're not. They're actually technical books. They're all books about how to become extremely competent. And to be honest, I know a lot, but I also have moments where I'm going, I don't know enough to confidently want to know all of this information. I just want to find the right person. So this book was so good, because it's more of a decision-making tool than how a heat pump works. And I think that's what's really fundamentally missing, is those decision-making tools for homeowners to feel confident they've got something now that contains all your experience and your decades of wisdom into what questions do I ask, how do I go about, how do I navigate this? And yeah, it's definitely the book at the top of all my heat pump books, without a doubt. Thanks, Louise. And I'm going to move over to Sian Richards. Hi, Sian. Sian is a member of our homeowner platform, Her Own Space. And Louise and I talked about how valuable it would be to have the experiences of a homeowner. We can in the industry talk a lot amongst ourselves, but we wanted to invite you, Sian, and thanks for coming. And I wanted to ask a few questions to Sian from her perspective as a homeowner, around installing and living with a heat pump. So my first question, Sian, is what made you choose a heat pump?
It was the next step in reducing my carbon footprint. So I think I'm not a very typical person looking at heat pumps. I'm very much a data geek. I've been working on my carbon footprint for a couple of decades now. And I was still burning gas, and that was, the one thing that I thought I could probably do quite easily.
Yeah.
And the timing of it was, I'd begun exploring retrofit about 10 years ago. Stop, start. Things were starting to stall a bit 2.5 years ago, I suppose. And I thought, okay, so if I can't move forward with the retrofit, then now is the time to go for a heat pump. And the now was actually the time when they increased the bus grant from 5,000 to 7,500. And I thought it just seemed that I should just go ahead with it. Yeah. And I still thought I would get some retrofit done before the heat pump went in, but it didn't turn out. So yeah.
It's interesting, Sian, you say, you think you're unusual, because I think we mustn't presume often, what's going on through homeowners who choose to install a heat pump. And we just must make sure we're in the industry open to any questions and any intentions that homeowners have. And you said, and I think it's really interesting because you installed a heat pump first, and you went through a journey of then planning long-term retrofit measures, which you're still doing at the moment as we're on the journey with you. And you're doing it all by yourself as well, obviously with some fantastic professionals as well around you. Your professional expertise is something that Sian really values without a doubt. How did you find an installer 2 years ago?
So when I actually decided that I should find out if my home's suitable, I know people say all homes are suitable, it just costs you a lot more, maybe, if you're not well insulated. I took part in a carbon co-op peer experiment, peer-to-peer thing, where we were challenged to turn down the flow temperature on our gas boilers over a period of 2 months, I think it was, and to see how it felt. Alongside that, I also started running the heating 24 hours a day. So within the space of a year, I was trying to run my house as if it was a heat pump, so that I was fairly confident by the time I started looking for installers that it would be a goer and a sensible thing to do. So British Gas sent me a letter, just a random mailing saying, we're doing heat pump surveys in your area. Can we interest you? So I said, oh, okay. I didn't think I'd be using British Gas, but I thought this is a good chance to see what a heat pump survey and heat loss looks like, start to learn some of the jargon. So I had that done. And then the people I was working with on the retrofit, that people powered retrofit, who I'd like to thank for doing it, they ran me a second heat loss survey and also gave options as to how the heat loss would change if I had various measures carried out. So that gave me confidence to go ahead. I did a lot of research. I watched a lot of Heat Geek videos, Mick Wall's Energy, whatever it is, podcasts. And I thought Heat Geek sounds the best bet for me. I didn't know of any reliable installers, designers around here. They promised to do the independent, small business, all good, do the design, do the install, but have Heat Geek do all the admin stuff, which they quite often can't do. So that's what I did. I just got in touch. I paid for my survey, so that was two surveys I paid for. But the second one was obviously knocked off the cost. And they recommended somebody. He came round. He was here for about 10 hours, I think. He was here for a full day, well into the evening, because my house is quite complicated. It's had various extensions done, lots of different, fabric things to poke in the walls, poke up in the light fittings, which, other people hadn't done, to be honest. Mm. So that gave me quite a lot of faith in him, really. He was willing to talk about different target room temperatures because I was still intending to do the retrofit. So I wanted scope to reduce my heat loss and not mean that I ended up with an oversized heat pump.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time talking about radiators. British Gas had wanted to change all the radiators. The Heat Geek, it's Dan. I'll just use his first name now. And he was quite amenable to, moving radiators around so that we had the best fit and minimise the number that would go to scrap and minimise the number of new ones. because that's all part of the carbon footprint in some way.
Yeah.
I think in the end it probably used up more labour cost to move everything around, but it was done and it worked.
Yeah.
It was only in the evening that we got to talking about the hot water cylinder, and I realised that I'd actually thought very little about hot water cylinders, and I hadn't appreciated that I would probably need a bigger one than I expected, because it's a 4-bedroom house. So you can't sensibly put a really small heat pump in, a small cylinder in. Yeah, so we kind of glossed over that a little bit, and I think that was one of the things that went a little bit wrong, possibly.
Well, that answers the next question, kind of what was your biggest, struggle? What if you'd known about, would you have done differently? So you've asked
I think it was the hot water aspect, because I had done, I thought, quite a lot of research, but it hadn't covered hot water. So as a single person living in a big house, your hot water consumption is low, and you find that you're heating your cylinder up and probably losing quite a lot of that heat, despite it being insulated and all the rest of it, which worried me a bit to begin with. But now that I've seen the actual figures and the costs, I'm okay with it. The only niggle was that the hot water pipes, because the gas boiler was downstairs, so all the hot water pipe were gradated from the gas boiler on the ground floor. The heat pump, all the kit, apart from the outside unit, was upstairs on the first floor in a kind of airing cupboard. And I recently discovered that the pipework comes down from the first floor to the first floor and then travels back up again to reach the first and second floors. So I think a bit of an oversight there, not enough time to talk about it properly. So I'm planning on getting that fixed when we start taking the floors up to carry on with the retrofit. So yeah. But really, I was, it all went very, very smoothly. There were some glitches with the heat pump software, which meant that I had several quotes and they didn't seem to add up. So I did some analysis and I sent it in, and they said, oops, yes, there was a software upgrade somewhere along the way. And your quote just doesn't make sense anymore. So
yeah. Thanks, Sean. Just to share, you're based near Manchester. So just in case anyone's wondering where Sean is. And you've obviously now been living with a heat pump for 2 years. Do you notice it anymore?
No, I don't.
But I will say that Sean has, and Celebrate to Her recently put her heat pump on Nesta Visitor heat pump. So we really celebrated Sean doing that so that people could come around and see her heat pump too. So yeah, Sean, you're saying obviously it's summer now. It's a heat wave going on, so it's a bit of an odd time to be talking about heating in the house, maybe. But you've lived through 2 winters. Yes, tell me.
Yes. The bonus of having a heat pump in the summer is that if you time your hot water cycle to come on at the hottest part of the day, you can sit in front of it and get cooled. It's amazing. Yes, amazing.
Oh, I love that. That's brilliant. Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much. We're perfectly timed at the moment, because we also wanted to open up the conversation to everyone who's attending here today. So thank you so much. And before, feel free to turn your cameras on as well. And I'm going to be going through the chat initially and also just answering questions as people put their hand up. So bear with me. I'll try and make sure I can see everyone on the screen. Maybe we can kick off the conversation based on a point in Louise's book, which is page 33, which is a chapter on our mindset towards heat pumps. And you say, you know, because you're reading this book, you probably don't know what it's like to live with a heat pump system. And my question really is, how can we expect homeowners to confidently invest thousands of pounds in something they haven't experienced, and that they don't know what it will feel like to live with? And what more could the industry do to bridge that experience gap? And I think Sian's experience is really interesting, living with a heat pump, I think. And using your gas boiler and experiencing what it likes to live with a heat pump before installing was really interesting. Step on your journey. Would anyone like to ask a question, add an experience in? Feel free to use the chat. Laura, you said, so interesting, hot water cylinders are complicated and tricky for variations of occupants. Yes. Would anyone like to ask a question? Laura, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Well, we had this on a recent passive house course, and the guy was like, well, you can make the cylinder much smaller. It just means you have to wait ages until the next person can have their shower. And we've had discussions like this before with people, and like there are maybe two people in the house and they're like, yeah, but we need a 250-litre cylinder, which is significantly more losses for Christmas, and it's difficult to like weigh out the magnitude of what the impact of, well, I don't know, maybe Louise knows it, or maybe Sian knows it, may the impact of these different decisions. And I think as well, if you're not doing the calculations yourself, it's really difficult to see what the impact will be. So like sometimes people have the advice. We had one homeowner that had advice on replacing radiators, but like it's difficult to tell what the difference would be. So they were like, no, we won't bother. And then like it was tricky. This is my experience. I guess I'm looking for feedback from either Sian or Louise, if that makes sense, or if they had different experiences.
So on the occupancy point and the hot water, there were actually guidelines we have to follow. Now, I can't remember how many litres per person it is, because Richard has gone off. He's not here, sitting next to me. But we have to, so we are actually obligated to meet the occupancy. So there is some leeway, but really you have to imagine if you're in Sian's situation, moving out of your house, and a family of 4 or 5 moving in, and the fact that that's what water cylinder needs to meet their needs. So it can seem a bit tough and a bit wasteful, but also to bear in mind what Richard says about cylinders is they really do lose so little. So it can be awkward in terms of the size of the cylinder. It really shouldn't be too much of a problem in terms of heat loss. The heat pump will just top the hot water up, according to your usage, and it will just keep it at the temperature. It won't lose a lot of heat. There isn't a lot of loss, but there is that obligation to meet the occupancy size of your property and the number of bedrooms.
Is it based on number of bedrooms on the MCS? Yeah. Well, on passive house, it's a larger margin of loss because the hot water is like so you have to be more careful, I guess. But yeah, it's not a lot.
Interesting. Dell asks, what was the temperature, Sian, you turned the gas? Oh, it's Helen. Sorry, Helen. You just said it was Helen. Your username said Dell. What was the temperature you turned down the gas boiler to, Sian? Oh, you're still on mute. There we go. Yeah.
I've only just muted actually. I think it was installed to use 59, so that was my baseline. I went down to 55, then I went down to 50, and I think below that the boiler just didn't heat the house well enough.
Mm. Mm.
And
Yeah,
you do
thank
have to
you.
be a little bit careful not to turn it too low, re Legionella, because we have to raise temperatures for Legionella. So don't go too low or keep it too low in your experiments. But it is a really good experiment to do, and I cover that in my book too, don't I? So
Yeah, brilliant. What is the temperature out of interest, Louise? Do you know for Legionella? That they 60
I think
degrees.
it is high 50s. It is about
Yeah.
58, 59. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, you wouldn't normally so redesign
Over
temperature. I
50.
mean, in a extreme retrofit or a renovation or a new self build, we'd want to design at 45 or even lower. But in retrofit, we often design around 50. You can design at 55. You can design. There were some of the designs are pushing the envelope right up to 60, where but if you think of a gas boiler could produce about 80 degrees. There is quite a gap there, which is why that experiment is so useful, and that plus that running your system in a different way to feel that even as near as you can do it. You don't get the even temperature because you've still got the thermostatic control, which is an up and down, so you can't quite emulate it, because a heat pump will normally be controlled with weather compensation, so it's like topping up in a much more tiny way. It doesn't like overshoot. With the thermostatic controls, you overshoot. That's what you get, the up and down. So you'll get cold and then you'll get hot and then you'll get cold. But you can still even it out a lot more than most people do with their timed on and off ways they run their heating system.
Interesting. Would anyone like to add anything to the conversation around preparing homeowners? I think Sean's experience is really interesting, actually. And you talk about it, as you said in your book, Louise, being heat pump ready, a term we talk about a lot. That can mean in mindset and experience, as well as making sure your plumbing's in the right place as well while you're doing the renovation work. If anyone doesn't want to add anything to this, I will bring up another part of your book, Louise, which I think is really interesting, which is that homeowners experience retrofit as one journey, and the industry often delivers it as a sequence of transactions. And you talk about a typical process from inquiry to contract in the book. Step 1, initial inquiry and guide estimate, heat loss, detailed proposal, installation, agreement and contract, and then also going to maintenance. Where do we think, this is a real discussion question. We want homeowners to experience the process as a continuous journey, but the industries we see often delivers it in these stages. But where along the pathway are homeowners most likely to lose confidence, and what could we do differently to prevent that? And Sean, you might have a point when you felt along the journey that things got a little trickier, or is there anything that happened to you?
Sorry, on what parts?
So any of the parts, from the beginning inquiry to survey, right through to handover and aftercare. Was there any point you felt a little bit, found things harder?
No, not really. I mean, the house had already had floors taken up, so I was already, used to people pulling up the floor and putting pipes in and all the rest of it. honestly went really, really smoothly with my heat geek. He was very good. He was very dedicated.
Yeah.
There were problems with the heat geek platform that the quotes got messed up. But the actual, the process worked pretty well.
Yeah. That's great to hear.
Yeah, no,
Does
the MCS part, that was fine. There was a little glitch trying to get approval to connect to the grid, I think. And in the end, they said, well, we'll let you connect, but if you if you go over your allowance, whatever that was, then we may ask you to switch off the heat pump, which seemed a bit odd, but they never did ask me to switch it off. So
just to say that. Louise, do you want to add anything to that point?
Yeah, so one of the problems we've got in the industry, and it's not particularly in our geographical area, but I know that in some areas in the north, because some of my colleagues in the north work with different, so we have to put in what's called a DNO application, and there's big pressure going to try and streamline it, because that can delay in a straightforward retrofit where a person isn't necessarily doing a big project, but they just want upgrading their heating as their retrofit. That can sometimes delay it, and it feels like that the industries aren't working well together. And obviously we're a tiny little industry trying to tap into a great big, our DN, where we make DNO applications to, is UK Power Networks, where there's several bodies across the UK. So heat pumps draw, they draw when they turn on. They draw more when they turn on. So it's like the loading, as I understand it, has to be okay for then. But like Sean was saying, she's never been asked to turn it off. Well, when her heat pump's just running, it's not drawing a huge amount of electricity. It's like almost they're almost seeming to allow for that very, very tiny startup, as if the heat pump was going to draw electricity like that all the time, and it isn't. Sometimes on larger properties we fit a cascade system, so then you're very likely to have both the units starting up at the same time or either draw. But that is a real challenge we've got in the industry, and us little installers at the bottom of the chain have no influence or no way to push things. If even if it's somebody's boiler's broken down and you're trying to do an installation as quickly as you can, we can't go ahead until we've got that approval. So there is a glitch in the industry there, caused by something completely outside, and there is obviously powers that be, lobbying going on to say, come on, let's get this better for homeowners, because obviously it's the homeowners that are then, you wouldn't necessarily know why a delay was. But it doesn't, as I say, it's not really too much of an issue in our area. So the sways of the country, it's really pretty good. Other sways of the country where it can be really, really difficult, and obviously that impacts on the homeowner. So it's worth knowing there's something like that going on, and that if your installer says, oh, we're sorry, we're waiting for the DNO, they're not being awkward.
Ellie just adds, is currently waiting for DNO for a new battery and being advised the DNO can take up to 45 to 60 working days at the moment. And Sarah says, yeah, that's bonkers. It's polar opposite of how it should be on principle because of the disproportionate effect. Exactly. Definitely. Laura asks, what, and this is a question maybe to you again, Louise, what is the process if something is not quite right? How would you identify that as a homeowner? And I think that's about aftercare, something that's still talked about a lot, isn't it?
So things are radically changing just right at the moment in this space. So we've had a sort of consumer protection set up, but it hasn't necessarily been very effective or very satisfactory for anybody. We've had to pay for all the time we've been MCS, and we've been with MCS since it started, so sort of 16, 17 years. We've had to pay out for consumer code, where if something went wrong, we could take it to a sort of dispute resolution, and we have to pay for that every year. And we've only used it a real literal handful of times and all that in all those years. But it's just not very effective. It's just not, and a lot of things seem to fall through the net, and homeowners don't know whether they should complain to our certification body, who we're certificated with, or to MCS, or to this REC or HISE, and or just a normal consumer protection. And none of it seems to have been very effective. But just now, we're all transitioning over under MCS. MCS are taking on complaints directly, and I was with them at the installer show on their stand week before last, and they've increased their customer service and complaints handling teams exponentially, the stats of their staff. So that means a homeowner should be able to now, and we've tested this actually, because we had the rather distressing situation of a guy came up to Richard in the car park of his sailing club and said, "Oh, Dad, I wish I'd known you did heat pumps. I've just had a heat pump installed, but it's kind of gone all wrong." And so Richard obviously said, "Well, you need to I would ring MCS," and because he said, "I can't get the guy to come back," and obviously we were very distressed to hear this, but he rang MCS, and then the guy has come back. So it seems to be a much better space. So we're switching over to what's called redeveloped scheme. There's now this whole thing called the customer commitment, which your installer should present you with really at the beginning of the relationship, and it should be, but it's taken such a long time to get to that point. It's this redeveloped scheme. It's like taken 3 years in the making. It's been so difficult for them to get all the certification bodies lined up, and then MCS to grow their staff. But we're just at that point now where it is an improving picture, which I feel really happy about for homeowners. And it should be much more of a one-stop shop that you can ring MCS and they should be able to help. And also MCS should ring you if you have an install. Every install that happens, they should be ringing and checking that you are happy. But of course, sometimes that'll be before you can really tell if you're happy, because if you have your install in the summer, you won't know until a couple of months into the winter. But at whatever point, you should be able to ring MCS's helpline and explain what's going on, and then it should be able to be reviewed with your installer, and you should have more confidence that you have got that, But of course, my thing is, have that relationship with your installer and continuity, and that a good installer should support you. But if you happen to have sort of taken somebody on, and maybe something's happened, and things, if you go for a very small installer, then you won't necessarily get the continuity, or you go for a national installer, again you won't necessarily get the continuity. But you should have backup with MCS a lot better now than you might have done years ago.
Interesting. And I'm just going to jump to Sarah Shooter, who is a solicitor advocate and real speciality in construction and built environment disputes as well. You mentioned complaints go to an ombudsman scheme. All approved installers pay a levy for this independent ADR service. Sarah, can I just ask you quickly to say that in your own words, if you don't mind, with your background?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
I can come on screen. I just had all my papers blow. Oh, my lovely, sorry guys, I'm in a vest today. I'm really, no. I've got a jacket.
It's hot.
Yeah, so the ombudsman scheme, it's there, I feel so much more professional even just for 2 seconds with my professional hat on, rather than the other little jobs I'm doing today. Yeah, so ombudsman schemes, they exist as an independent service, and that's the real important thing from a consumer perspective, Louise. Exactly as you've said, you want that relationship, you want that communication. It can be hard to get people back. Sometimes they're too busy. Sometimes they genuinely just won't take your call, and almost, force the issue. So having these ombudsman schemes as a kind of a matter of public policy is really important. They exist in all sorts of areas. There's ones in travel, for example. There's ones in furniture installation. There's all sorts of ombudsman. There's new homes, which is one that I know the best. And the idea is that those who are certified or accredited through the association to which the National Ombudsman relates, they pay a small levy, and it basically helps everybody else to be able to access those, those ADR services. So it's independent. You have somebody who will look at the complaint and who will give a remedy to the complainant. That could be money, that could be performance, it could be the issuance of an apology. It depends what the frame of reference is for the Ombudsman. But essentially it's access to an independent service, because everybody who is accredited, who wants to carry that certificate and basically make money from having the certificate, because it's a good thing to be able to wave at customers, but to have that backup service in place. We have one within the Solicitors Regulation Authority as well. You pay a small amount on top of your annual accreditation. It's basically a kind of an insurance package that gives you that access as a consumer, as a matter of public policy.
Yeah.
Does it help?
Yep. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you so much.
We love it. And as professionals, we have to grit our teeth slightly with fees and things, but actually it's really important to have that in place. And actually as professionals, it also gives us the backup that actually there is that service in place. So it doesn't face one way, it is independent.
In both ways. Yeah. That's great.
Can I ask you a question, Sarah, about that? Because I'm not aware of where that Ombudsman service fits within our renewables industry. I'm aware of our renewable energy consumer code that we've been with all these years.
I've just checked it actually while you were just making the last couple of points. It is the Furniture and Home Improvement Ombudsman that specifically deals with MCS installers.
Right.
Okay.
In the chat.
Interesting.
So because I'm not aware of that as an installer, and yet such been around for so long.
I wasn't either. So it may be that you're in a transitional phase with all the other changes that are going on, because you've had that historical issue as professionals, as well as not your own customers but other customers saying, oh, we've got our frustrations, what do we do? It may be that something is on the move to just get that improved. And actually, of course, that would be a really good thing, wouldn't it? Because this is a part of industry that we want to grow. We want more customers, installers want more work. It absolutely makes sense to have in place that kind of a backup service for when things don't go well, because it's it's sod's law, and it's the laws of probability. It's going to happen to someone as a consumer, it's going to happen to someone as an installer, and it makes sense to have it in place. But I don't know this particular ombudsman myself. It's not one I've worked with or anything like that, so could do some more digging, have a look around.
Be interesting, because there are so many changes going on at the moment.
All I would add is they do exist under legislation, so they are given powers through law, if you like, in order to be able to have a capitalized ombudsman service. There is sort of legal framework around it, so you can't just set up one of these things and say, pay me some money and I'll give you an ombudsman. Okay, so there is that that sort of legal cushion.
Yeah, interesting. Would anyone like to put their hand up? Would anyone like to add any more questions? I think, Sean, did you have a question? Yes. So Sean is ongoing with work being done at the moment, and I know Helen was asking as well what further works Sean is still doing in the house, and she did get a heat pump installed first 2 years ago. Sean, do you want to tell us a little bit about your kind of long-term plans as well?
Yes, I was just typing in a reply actually. So at the time that the heat pump install was decided on, there had been some work done to the front bay, which had been rebuilt, and so the front rooms, ground floor and first floor, had been insulated, triple glazed windows. But that was about it, really. Since I've had the heat pump installed, I've had most of the ground floor, suspended floor insulated. I've had some walls insulated, and one ceiling, ground floor extension, and it's ongoing.
Watch this space.
Hopefully I'll get the whole house finished at some point.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for sharing that. We have time. We are nearing 1:30. If anyone would like to ask Sean or Louise any questions, feel free. And just to say as well that I'm really pleased to be able to be passing on at the end of this session access to a digital copy of Louise's book. So we will be getting that out by the end of tomorrow. So not quite today, we'll just sort it out and make sure it hits your inboxes by Friday. And it's been really great to hear from Louise on the book and how it's definitely spread since its launch a couple of months ago now, Louise. Do you have any update on us on how well sales are going or etc., or how much traction it's got?
I don't know how about sales on because you get Amazon updates sales twice a year. One's at the end of July, so I haven't had my first one yet. And to be honest, I've given away physical copies of books. I've been really amazed at the number of people at Installer Show, my colleagues, who were saying, oh, I'm halfway through reading it, and I've had really good feedback from other people in the industry. And I mean, that's something that I'd like to say to everybody on this call who's going to receive the copy is I'd be really interested to hear feedback about, I've had feedback from people like who run community groups encouraging heat pumps, and they've made suggestions. They've emailed me and said, oh, I think a summary of this chapter or a spin-off about this or a spin-off about that. So I see it as an evolving thing, and I'm starting to create a sort of warm wisdom community, which could be either for homeowners or professionals or just generally. I mean, topics keep evolving even since I finished the book. So I'm always looking for things to look at and write about and comments and yeah, just continue a discussion really with fellow professionals and homeowners about how we can keep providing the information that does help people move forward on their journeys to get a heat pump. So I welcome any comments when you have time to in your busy schedules to actually read the book, or if you pass it on, I'm happy for people to pass it on to homeowners that you come into contact with in your work who are wanting to go on the journey, because that's the point of the book really, is to share that knowledge. It's not, and it is copyrighted, but it's not, but also I'm really using it as a resource to share, and that's what this webinar is about for me. So
yeah, which is amazing. Exactly, it's there to educate and provide a stress-free path for people installing a heat pump. Ellie says Amazon is showing only one in stock. So well done, Louise, on that. Now the race till the end of this webinar to see who's going to buy that last issue there. Sarah says summer reading, thank you. And it is fantastic books, Louise, because it's finally a book that I would feel comfortable to pass on to a woman homeowner that we support, who would want to have a little kind of Bible sitting when they're on that journey, far more than unfortunately any of the other books which about technicality. And also I think this book is great because I don't think it dates. The industry, even though heat pumps have been around a long time, I actually was thinking about this morning when I was looking at my other heat pump books, and I was wondering, actually, are these up to date now? Has technology moved? Has things changed? And it might not have, but I did think suddenly as a consumer, I'd much rather have a book that was about the kind of the overall decision-making journey than necessarily teaching me all the ins and outs that I want. And I think one lesson we say as well to homeowners is once you're choosing professionals, you have to hand over trust to professionals. Because if you don't, that's often where the risk goes, is you immediately preempt things are going to go wrong. You have to know that you've done your diligence as you go through in the book to find the right person. And when you choose that right person, that trust is there and you're ready to go because you've asked all the right questions.
Well, I don't mention any manufacturers in the book, on purpose, and partly because products change. I did mention a little bit about refrigerants, because that is a big area that's going to change, and I've sort of written other things that's where I've connected to it from the book. There's big changes in refrigerants which affects heat pumps due to legislation to reduce refrigerants with higher global warming potential. So there's a little bit about that, but I try to not in that way make it timeless. There are things shifting in the market to do with less invasive retrofit because of price sensitivity. Since Octopus Energy came in to the market in 2022, it's made the retrofit market really price sensitive, and it's really difficult to negotiate, because one of our main makes of heat pump, this week with this and another, this year they've now raised the prices of those units by 5%. So it's like, how do we reduce the cost of installs when manufacturers are putting equipment prices up by 5%? So it's a really squeezed market. Now that is kind of what's happening now, and that might change in a few years, but that's where we're at the moment. Is retrofit, it feels weird. You go to an independent installer and you're going to get quoted a higher price than if you went to Octopus a couple of years ago when they were operating in their very almost loss leader model. So that's one of the things that might make homeowners feel concerned. It is a bit, you get what you pay for, and we might see, us independent installers might seem expensive, but there are a whole raft of reasons why we're expensive. All the MCS stuff is a big thing to handle for those of us that have that and don't do that through Heat Geek or something. Then you've just got training and having apprentices in your business like we have. And then we've got premises. We've got, as Anna is in the showroom right now, we've got a showroom where people can come in with their plans and talk through their projects before they've got a physical building to even look at for those kind of clients. And it's just a whole business. So we're expensive, but it's the choice. You do get what you pay for. And if you want a relationship, then obviously I'm saying think about going for a sort of slightly larger independent installer. But small independent installers are good too. And I'm not saying you wouldn't get a decent install from utilities, but you don't get that peace of mind of continuity of relationship, because you'll have different teams, and you'll be on the phone following with people you never meet. So it's a very different relationship. There's different ways to install a heat pump, and it's just understanding what you want. That's what I would say.
I'm going to mention something. We've got till 1:45 actually. We've got is the end time, and there's 2 points I want to mention. And maybe Louise, you've got thoughts on this. Actually, one of my best friends in Canada is having heat pump installed, and I was on a call with her, and she just said, "Oh, I have to go and answer the door. I've got a heat pump installer coming around." And I said, "Oh, can I listen to what they say and hear how that experience is for you?" She's on Vancouver Island, and I said I was just really interested. And there was one thing they said at the end, and they were a large installer, and they were very large. She said they were the largest installer. I can't remember who they were. And then she said, "Oh, I'm having a smaller father and son team who've been around, who's also been recommended to me to come around and quote." And the larger installer said something that I thought was quite interesting to put her off and made her fear going for a smaller installer by saying that, well, they could go bust any day and then that's it. You've got no, fallback. But we're a big company. We're not going anywhere. And I thought that was a really interesting sales tactic. And I was surprised to hear it, but I did say to her, I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. I think with a father and son, business, and they've been recommended by people in local area, they'll equally have relationships and be, and he's got a son ready to take over the business. It's kind of says it in itself. So it was an interesting conversation from across the waters in Canada as they go through decarbonisation as well as the UK.
I think it's exactly the same here. It is horses for courses. I think none of us as independent business owners can guarantee we're going to stay in business. I mean, I've also got a son who's training to be a heat pump engineer. You know, it's yeah, I just think that's a bit of a sales tactic, isn't it? Because as I say, you're not going to have a continuity of the same people within a large organization. A small organization, well, I think it is tough. It's tough for small business owners in the UK at the moment. I think we're all trying our very best to run really, you know, we've run a really stable heating company for 40 years, or Rich has been, you know, a heating engineer for 40 years. But yeah, I think there's no guarantees in anything. But I think MCS was trying to be the safety net again. If you know, if you hire a small company and there is no son and the guy retires or whatever it is, I think, you know, I think MCS are trying to set themselves up to be a support network. And because I know that MCS have reached out, like, say, for bigger contracts. We had somebody wanting to do some sort of social housing, a sort of bigger project, and they'd reached out to MCS and said, who are your bigger installers in this area? So MCS are communicating and know their installer network. So I think even if you go with a small company, I think MCS would help you find another suitable person if your person retired or went out of business or whatever. So exactly. I don't think that's necessarily a valid argument.
No. And I think the last thing to end, which is quite prevalent and really creates a really comprehensive webinar for everyone, is the Warm Homes Loan Scheme 2026 obviously got launched last week. So Desnes has published the first detail we see now around the new finance scheme, which is going to operate later this year. And the guidance obviously is primarily aimed at lenders at the moment, but it does give us insight into how homeowners are going to be able to access finance, and how that wider retrofit market is likely to evolve. So what we're seeing is it's going to be targeting the able to borrow, people who can afford repayments, want to improve their home. And we're also going to see it for owner occupiers and private landlords borrowing. And eligible measures that they said are air source heat pumps, ground source biomass boilers for rural properties, heat network connections, solar PV battery storage, domestic wind turbines, and micro hydro systems with EV charge points can only be funded when installed with solar PV or battery storage at the moment. And notably, air-to-air heat pumps are not yet eligible until MCS standards are introduced on those. So we're going to see loan caps of around a battery storage £15,000, air source heat pumps loans of £20,000, ground source heat pump £35,000. And one important feature, so homeowners can combine the Warm Homes loan with the boiler upgrade scheme, which, just to mention for anyone who doesn't know, has now gone up again to £9,500. So Sian, you caught it when it went from 5 to 7.5, and now it's gone up to 9.5. Oh, sorry, Louise, you're on mute.
£9,000 for those on oil or LPG, I believe.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
And we're done, and possibly only until next end of financial year, like end of March, beginning of April next year, we believe. But whether if conflicts in the Middle East continue, whether they'll extend that, we're kind of hoping they might, because otherwise we might get a horrible log jam of those of us who work in oil areas like we do, around that. By Christmas we'll be booking the last installs in that we could fit in before the end of that financial year if they don't keep that uplift. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And I'll end also on a comment from Ben. Ben, also going back to the previous issue, says that feels like a reasonable risk, but most important, I think, to understand how many installs the individual or team have done and how many of the specific model of heat pumps you're having that they have installed. Ben says, I'm having one installed next month by Heat Pump Installers UK from Huddersfield. They've been going about 14 years, having installed more than 60 of the Grant heat pumps I'm having and hundreds of various models they offer. also feel a lot of people would rather choose the local company team over the big players like Octopus and British Gas. Definitely the MCS database and places like Trustpilot were really good to look at. So thank you for sharing that as well. And Julie says, thank you, very interesting. Can't wait to read the book. So on that note, with a few minutes left, I think I hope everyone's really enjoyed today's webinar. And I think, thank you again. Chica says, looking forward to reading and recommending your book, Louise. So thank you again. Please reach out to Louise and I if anyone has any questions at all to follow on, and we'll pass them on. And Louise, thank you so much for sharing this far and wide, for sure. And thank you so much, Sean, for sharing your experiences of your heat pump journey as well. And I'll be catching up with you on the rest of your retrofit journey as well. So thank you to everyone. I hope the heat doesn't make everyone flake too much today, and have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you to everyone for joining.
Thank you for your time, everybody, for attending. It's really, really lovely to share my big bit of work that I've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a good day.